Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this Decline Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today it is once again yet another check on the list for why Net Zero is going to fail and why Ed Miliband is an absolutely mad man for trying to keep pushing it. However, having said that, to be fair to him, not all his ideas are bad and necessarily things I'm against. Solar panels on all new homes as part of Labour's Net Zero push being one of them. Keir Starmer rejects Tony Blair's calls to reset irrational climate policies because they were doomed to fail. I mean, they are doomed to fail, but not because new houses will be required to have solar panels. Now, the only reason that I am against this, necessarily, is because it makes housing slightly less affordable for people, as it will add a few grand to the price of a new home, because of the price of installing solar panels, because it's not particularly cheap necessarily. How do I know? I'm looking into it myself to have solar panels on my own home. So house builders would be mandated by law to install solar roof panels on new properties by 2027 under new rules seen by the Times, which ministers have claimed would slash energy bills and reduce emissions. Both of which, by the way, are to some extent true. I have family who have put solar panels on their roof and it has indeed slashed their energy bill and is reducing their emissions. So for once, a net zero push is actually not having to lie about this. Mandating them by law, though, obviously I'm instinctively against that sort of thing. However, given everything has to be mandated by law these days, this is one of the less offensive versions of mandating housing restrictions by law. The change was estimated to add about $3,300 to the cost of building a semi-detached or terraced house and just under $4,000 for a detached property, which, to be honest with you, overall, not that bad considering house prices these days. And let's be fair, I much prefer solar panels to be put on roofs than in farmers' fields. I just don't think this stuff should be subsidised, but this isn't subsidising it at all. This is just telling new build developers, all these roofs, they need solar panels, which, as I say, in terms of net zero pushes, this is one of the least offensive. It is expected that new homeowners will recoup the extra costs within 4 years, with an average 3-bedroom semi-detached saving more than $1,000 a year on energy bills. Now, from people I know with solar panels, I'm not exactly sure what their saving is, so I don't exactly know how accurate that is, but it's something that I can believe. You put your washing machine on, hell, you have an electric car, and you charge it during the day, you're definitely going to be saving money, there's no doubt about that. The move comes despite pressure from developers to make solar panels optional over claims the technology was not suitable for all new properties. That's probably true. 2 in 5 new builds are fitted with solar panels today. So they're already way on the way to having solar panels on at least a majority of houses anyway. So this is just pointless regulation, which again actually makes it one of the less offensive ones. Ministers who set a target of building 1.5 million homes by the end of Parliament said the change was vital if they were to meet their target of decarbonising the electricity grid by 2030 and reducing the average energy bills by up to £300. Yes, I can see how you can play around with statistics to reach that. Unfortunately, you are not building 1.5 million new homes. This is why there is a bit of a split in the cabinet at the moment, because unfortunately Angela Rayner has been complaining that that's basically impossible because they're not actually doing anything with regulations to make it easier. In fact, if anything, this regulation makes it slightly harder, but still. Anyway, further down in the article, number 10 said that the Cabinet was united behind the government's net zero policy, being overseen by the Energy Secretary Ed Miliband, but stopped short of guaranteeing he would remain in post for the rest of Parliament. Interesting. I wonder why that is. Downing Street has previously said Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, would keep their cabinet positions for the whole of Labour's 5-year term in power. That's probably the worst news I've actually heard from this article so far. Rachel Reeves should be out of the cabinet by now. Blair's comments received backing from one of the country's most left-wing unions, who warned workers would not support Labour's plans without investment. Sharon Graham, the General Secretary of Unite, said her union was not against net zero, but it was not to be achieved without serious investment in new jobs. Well, funny that. The Tony Blair Institute for Global Change later said it supported the government's pledge to meet net zero by 2050 after Downing Street officials raised concerns over how original comments were interpreted, because he had an issue with the 2030 target, which is ridiculous, and not going to be reached, but we'll get into that. But first, there was an announcement yesterday that every new car park may have to be covered with solar panels, as solar canopies would be compulsory under proposals estimated to save $28,000 on electricity bills at an 80-space car park. And again, this is one of those regulations that, to my mind, not only makes sense, but is probably preferable. because it's simply a better alternative to putting the solar panels on farmland when I think we need to be thinking much more about food security, say. And it comes with the added protection of your car from the sun, stopping it getting overly hot. Obviously protects it from rain, and on the best side of all this, of course, if you have an electric car, you get your power generated for dead cheap. And obviously these people care an awful lot about CO2 emissions. That's going to drop massively if they can have a load of car parks that have a solar panel as a roof. It's a good idea. Certainly the least offensive, but obviously there have been a huge amount of offensive policies that have come out as a result of net zero, and a lot of them are falling through now at this point, which is horrific. So Danish firm shelves huge UK wind farm project over rising costs. Orsted Council's fourth stage of Hornsea project off Yorkshire coast, which was set to include enough turbines to power 1 million homes. And that's it. It's just done. They can't afford it. They bidded for this project during a time where a load of bids were simply not going through because the bids they were going in for those who don't know, energy companies will bid for contracts by saying this is the price we'll go with and the lowest price wins it. And obviously here Orsted went for a price that ended up being too low, due to the fact that, well, because everyone's now got this net zero push, now prices are rising, and obviously with Trump's international tariffs, which caused market shock, there's an awful lot of uncertainty that's happened now, along, obviously, with a whole load of other reasons as to why these prices would go up and be uncertain. Which is part of the reason you want as much homegrown power as possible and not rely on international supply chains so much, which is what we obviously do with wind farms and solar panels, given that they basically all come from China. So the world's biggest wind power developers cancelled plans for one of the UK's largest offshore wind farms in a significant blow to the government's green energy target. And I think The Guardian are actually underplaying this. I think it was actually going to be the biggest, or at least that's what I remember BBC Radio 4 saying. The Danish wind power company Ørsted said the Hornsea 4 project no longer made economic sense because of soaring costs in the industry's global supply chain after it won the government contract last year. The decision to halt work on the project is a major blow to the government's plan to quadruple the UK's offshore wind capacity by the end of the decade to help create a virtually fossil fuel-free electricity system. How's that going over in Spain and Portugal? Honestly, when I put out that net zero video about Spain and Portugal the other day, the amount of people that would just call me stupid and not go into any detail about what part of the video was actually wrong was ludicrous. Yes, net zero did contribute quite majorly to that blackout. How can I tell? Because France's interconnectors over to Spain were backed up instantly by their nuclear power. Do not give me this nonsense that net zero did not contribute to it. How could it not? 100% of the grid is on renewables in Spain, or at least they managed 100% renewables recently. I am not having this. Net zero, if not properly planned for, which is one of the most expensive things in the world to plan for, ends up with major blackouts of two countries. We have that definitive proof. And I don't think it'll be the only time it happens as well. So the fourth phase of the huge Hornsea wind farm located off the Yorkshire coast was expected to use 180 giant turbines to generate enough green electricity to power the equivalent of 1 million homes, or 2.4 gigawatts of power capacity, which all sounds great and well and good, but this is the problem, and this is why, anti-net zero's point. Even when you spend all this money on this stuff, sometimes it's going to fall through because of the uncertainty of having to rely on, say, China for all of these turbines and solar farms. And then even when we do get a whole load of the grid onto net zero, or green energy, your electricity prices don't necessarily come down anyway. I mentioned it in the other video, but Spain and Portugal have some of the highest electricity prices or energy prices throughout Europe, despite the fact that they have managed to get to a point where every other day they seem to be on 100% green energy. Like, the nonsense of it all being cheap is just laid to bear every time. There are uses for it. Having it on your individual home, yeah, probably a good way to cut down your energy costs because you get the electricity straight away. However, having it on a mass scale seems to be really, really expensive and seems to be quite unreliable as well. You need backups, obviously. Whether it be nuclear or whether you keep using fossil fuels for a bit, I don't really mind, but we clearly need them because we can't even get the net zero stuff built. So Ørsted Chief Executive Ramos Erbo said the combination of increased supply costs, higher interest rates, and increased execution risk means the project was unlikely to provide value for the company. The project is the latest to be derailed by increased costs caused by higher inflation and interest rates combined with problems of global offshore wind supply chain in recent years. He really doesn't want to say, but yeah, this is effectively him blaming Rachel Reeves because inflation increased under Rachel Reeves thanks to her budget, and I do mean that directly, and obviously the interest rates have not come down as a result of that. Last year, Ørsted scrapped 2 offshore wind projects off the US coast because of concerns over rising costs, and delayed the start of the 3rd project off the coast of Rhode Island and Connecticut by a year to 2026. So this is happening all over the world, so it is a global problem as well as it is just a British problem. So, we can't blame Rachel Reeves too much, but he certainly cited some things that are her fault. In 2023, the Swedish energy company Vattenfall stopped work on the multi-billion-pound Norfolk Boreas wind farm in the North Sea, which was designed to power the equivalent of 1.5 million British homes because it was no longer profitable. Oh, it's cheap, there's so much cheap energy we can have here. How are you failing to make it profitable then? You've got to bear in mind, by the way, this is all with government subsidies. So even when they're subsidised, it's unprofitable. And yet I'm believed to be told this is the future. Total nonsense. It's always been total nonsense. When it comes to wind farms and when it comes to solar panels, they are better on a small scale. This large scale clearly is not the way forward. Frack the ground in Britain, get that gas out, use those profits to invest in nuclear. That is the long-term solution to all this. Every now and then a company can build their wind farm or solar panels if they can get planning permission and if they can provably provide the local area with better outcomes than if they're not there. That is the way forward. Ørsted said on Wednesday that the wind industry faced short-term challenges with supply chain issues and regulatory and macroeconomic developments. Thank you, Rachel Reeves. Such problems has led to concern over the UK government's renewable energy goals, piling pressure on its auction for new renewable energy contracts. And I've been through stories like this before. They're finding it harder and harder under the Tory government especially, this was happening by the end, to actually sell these contracts off. However, in the interest of fairness, after all this bad news, and I've skipped a few paragraphs of it, Ørsted said the long-term outlook of offshore was strong because the world's growing demand for electricity and fresh focus on energy security and affordability that renewable energy provides, unless you, of course, look at Spain and Portugal. It has been a turbulent time for Ørsted for the implementation and restructuring plan in 2024, and it cancelled dividends payouts to shareholders for the 2023 and 2025 financial year in an attempt to bolster its finances. So I'm being told that net zero is the future, green energy, it's all great, it's dead profitable, it's cheap, it's the best way to go forward, and yet they had to literally cancel their shareholder dividends because they were running out of money. Yet forgive me for not believing you. Its market value has plunged about 80% since its peak in 2021. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Either this is a particularly badly run green energy company, or green energy is just not as profitable as we've been told for the past decade. I know this might sound unbelievable, but I don't think you should make business decisions based on what a 16-year-old girl who decided to skip school says. That's all I'm saying. Right, into more bad renewable energy news. The operator of an underground power station at Scotland's Hollow Mountain has put on hold its plans for a major expansion of the site. Renewables developer Drax has proposed building a new hydroelectric facility next to its existing complex inside Ben Cruachan, I'm sorry if I butchered that, near Dalmelly in Argyll. But it said the cost of the project has risen and it would not be bidding for the UK government support at this time. The company said the expansion could potentially go ahead in the future, subject to an appropriate balance of risk and return. I think there's more to it than all this. That is the second cancelled project in a day, and it just so happens to be a week, less than a week actually, after Reform's massive success last week. They can see which way the wind's blowing, and if there's one thing that Reform are absolutely huge on, aside from immigration of course, it's we are anti-net zero, because it is making you poorer. And clearly these companies are seeing the change in direction, and they know they're not going to get subsidies. They know that they are going to be getting a windfall tax after they get subsidies if Reform get in, because while Reform can't break those contracts, they can certainly recoup the government losses from these idiot subsidies. So the existing underground power station was opened by Queen Elizabeth II in 1965, and at the time it was the first large-scale reversible turbine storage energy project of its kind in the world. All that means is it's a hydroelectric plant, and it uses some of the energy that it uses to create the electricity to actually use a pump to pump water back up to the upper reservoir so it can effectively keep using it. Now, I know that may seem like some people, isn't that a perpetual motion machine? No, it obviously costs more energy to pump the water back up, but hydroelectricity is largely a kind of emergency power supply unit, and so when you're not in a time of emergency power, that's when you pump the water back up. So Drax has proposed investing 500 million into a construction project over 7 years, but last year it completed initial design and engineering work for a 600 megawatt expansion of Cruachan. The company said Drax believes that Cruachan 2 power is well aligned with the long-term system need for flexible generation and energy storage, and given its location, it's well placed to support system constraints between Scotland and England. Again, this is one of the less offensive versions of renewable energy, and it is in fact useful to have hydroelectric dams to provide emergency power during surges. So Drax remains committed to disciplined capital expenditure, which seeks to balance the risk and return of individual projects against other uses of capital to maximise value. In other words, it's not worth the money. Despite all these subsidies, despite all the big push by governments to invest money for every private pound spent into things like this, it's still not profitable. And where's GB Energy? As far as I'm concerned, that practically doesn't exist. I think they have about 10 workers and God knows what they're doing. This government is an absolute expert at wasting money, and this is just proof in the pudding. But when it comes to purely private sector industries, they just make it a whole lot worse. So the UK's largest oil and gas producer has said it expects to cut a further 250 jobs in Aberdeen. Thank you so much for this, Ed Miliband. This makes me very, very happy. Harbour Energy has said it has launched a review of its UK operations and had to take difficult steps, blaming regulation and punitive government measures. You don't say. The UK's government said its thoughts were with any workers affected by the commercial decision. Yeah, a commercial decision that is a reaction to your terrible policy. Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce described the news as a devastating blow, as Harbour Energy had previously announced the loss of 350 UK onshore jobs in 2023. So that is a total loss of 600 jobs in 2 years. That is absurd. That's 300 jobs as a direct effect of our net zero insanity. And it is no wonder, it is absolutely no wonder that Reform and Farage are saying that this is going to be the next Brexit. Of course it is. It's causing much more devastation than the EU. Of course people care about this. Oh, immigration's the big thing. Yeah, immigration is a big thing. But people also need jobs and they need energy in the modern world. Of course this is going to be bigger than immigration. Only slightly, but still bigger. Harbour Energy has been a vocal critic of the energy profits levy known as the windfall tax, introduced by the Tory government in 2022 and extended after Labour came to power last year. Oh yeah, like as much as I'm blaming Ed Miliband, Tories don't get away with any of this either. They were the ones that started the ball rolling on this damn thing. They were the ones that brought in the energy price cap, which may have been an Ed Miliband thing, but my God, Theresa May, why would you bring that in? You know, something like 70 energy companies pretty much died in the few years after the energy price cap was brought in, because only the big ones could actually handle the brunt of the force caused by a maximum price. Basic economics, people. The Tories didn't even understand it, and in fact didn't understand it so much they still brought in a windfall tax. And again, I suppose they could at least understand that it was going to badly affect UK companies and energy prices. Ed Miliband is the type to say, yeah, this doesn't affect energy prices at all, because oil and gas, you know, you buy it at wholesale price on a world market. Yeah, the tax still affects the consumer energy price, you moron. Honestly, we are run by complete and utter fools and have been for decades. People wonder why I'm such a fan of Thatcher, goodness me. The UK government said it was time to strengthen the tax to ensure North Sea oil and gas producers contributed their fair share towards the energy transition, which apparently is not enough because we're having plan after plan after plan with net zero falling through. It's also been pointed to its decision to headquarter Great British Energy in Aberdeen and establish a national wealth fund to help unlock investments in renewables. In other words, you've put the competition right next to us, what are you doing? Harbour Energy claimed it faces extensive taxation which has wiped out profits and undermined investments in North Sea operations. Scott Barr, managing director for the firm's UK business, said the review was expected to result in 250 job losses in Aberdeen, about a quarter of its workforce in the city, in addition to the 350 job cuts previously announced. Devastating, horrible in fact, and I'm supposed to believe that people want this. Of course they don't. And do you think the government is serious about changing any of this for the better? Of course not. Russell Borthwick, Chief Executive of Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, said this is a devastating blow for the 250 plus families directly affected, and I fear it's just the tip of the iceberg. Oh, it is, because in March the UK government launched a consultation on plans to replace the windfall tax on the profits of energy companies when it comes to an end in 2030. Yeah, that windfall tax we had a time limit on, we're probably going to bring in another one, and no doubt it's going to be bigger. Again, because of this tax and how ridiculous the tax system is in the UK, they managed to tax a medium-sized gas company 113% of its profits. They literally taxed a company into a loss. And I'm supposed to know governments know what they're doing. I think that happened under the Tories as well, by the way. This has been absurd for so long. Of course this is coming to an end. And of course Reform are going to be pushing this like mad. It is costing us too much to be ignored. Anyway, I think that will do it for this week's Net Zero rant. If you want to hear another, just wait for the news next week. I'm sure there'll be some. It's a massive issue in the UK. It's issues we're seeing all over Europe. What was the best thing to do in Europe? Apparently it was to go nuclear. That's what France did, and you barely hear any news of their issues with blackouts there, probably because nuclear is incredibly reliable and largely safe these days. The only type of people that don't want nuclear are the degrowther types, the types that want to see you all in poverty. And that's exactly what we're getting with their plan. So you think Greens are getting anywhere, don't be shocked if they don't. But anyway, that's for tomorrow's video. For now, it's the end of the video, so it's shill time. Tonight, we have a gaming stream, Subnautica. I'm carrying on with it. It's a chill stream where I talk to the chat quite a lot. People enjoyed it last week, I'm sure you will too. Come along to that. Tonight, probably from about 9 o'clock. Tuesday, it's Tosh Talks. God knows what the topic is going to be, but I would not be shocked if it's going through a whole bunch of times people on the online right have had Farage derangement syndrome, because I'm getting really fed up with it again. Then gaming next Thursday yet again, probably some Nautica again, and then on Saturday it's Laughing at the Guardian with some women, so do come along to that. Videos out as and when I can make them. If you want to help out the channel, do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. Great free ways to help me out in the algorithm. If you want to help me a bit more directly, you can always become a member or give super chats to super thanks. They are great and direct ways to help the channel, and I appreciate absolutely every person who is a member, especially those I disagree with, because it shows that we can have open and frank dialogue, and I do enjoy that. Right, that was everything for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.